Hey everybody, Georgevich here with Job Interview Tools, and today I want to talk to you about, well, bad interviewers. And if they're actually bad, or if they're just testing you. They're playing mind games with you in the interview. I mean, we all know that interviewers like to test candidates before they interview or hire them. And they do this by giving you skills assessment tests, psychometric tests, or any other kind of computer-based test. But sometimes the test itself is the interview, and they want to see how well you do in, well, strange circumstances. So what I'm going to do in this short video is walk you through a few different scenarios that have actually happened to my clients before, and they've shared them with me, where they thought their interviewer was just being rude, inconsiderate, or they weren't sure if they were being tested or not. So I'm going to walk you through these scenarios, and as I do, I'm going to share with you some advice that will help you respond accordingly to whether if you're being tested or not. And a word of caution, some of the strategies that I will share with you, could disqualify you in the interview process, and you'll see why as we go through them. So the first one here is, I had a guy write into me and he says, "Hey Don, my interviewer kept looking at his watch the whole time during the interview." And he's like, I just thought that was so rude. And you know what? It is. Someone, just anyone, even if we were just sitting down having coffee, if I kept looking at my watch, you'd be like, "Don, that's pretty rude." Well, in the interview, what could be happening is, one, the interviewer could just be rude. He could have an appointment, could be anything, but he could also be testing you. And if you don't do anything, well, then you fail the test. If you say something, you might pass the test. And one of the things that you can say in a situation like that is, "Excuse me, sir, but do you have somewhere else that you need to be? Would you like to reschedule this interview for a different time?" Now, that kind of response from a candidate is a huge power move. You're essentially calling out your interviewer. Now, if he's testing you, you pass the test. If he really just has somewhere else to be and he's just not that engaged in the interview, he might think you're a little bit rude. So a word of caution, but if you really don't care what happens in the interview, or if you really don't want to work for somebody who is so inconsiderate in the interview because they keep looking at their watch, then call them out on it. And they're either going to push it back in your face and kick you out, or, they're going to apologize and move on with the interview. So that's just one example. Another one is, sometimes your interviewer might seem disconnected or disengaged from the interview and just kind of, not really paying attention to you the whole time. You're talking and answering their questions and, their mind is elsewhere. Now, the interviewer could, have personal problems or something that, is taking their mind, off the interview. So in a case like that where your interviewer is just unengaged, I think the best response is to bring them back into the interview. And the best way to re-engage them is to ask them questions. And that'll kind of pull them back in. And you might simply just, now I wouldn't call them out and say, "Well, sir, you seem really disinterested in this interview." I wouldn't say that. But what I would say is, "Can you tell me a little bit more about, the responsibilities in this position? Or can you tell me a little bit more, about what my role would be? Can you tell me, what you like about working here?" Something to engage this person, to pull them back into the conversation. And you're essentially, by doing this, you're controlling the pace and the rhythm of the interview. And that could be a test, or this person's mind could just be elsewhere. It happens. Another thing that you can say is there another part of my experience that you would rather, talk about? And that's just a great little comeback to kind of control the pace of the interview, put it back on track. So if they just don't really seem interested, and maybe maybe they're bored. Maybe they are bored with what you're saying. So you just simply say, "Hey, you seem a little, disinterested in talking about this. Would you like me to talk about, this instead?" And that'll kind of put the interview back on track. Now, again, if it's a test, then you passed. It's as simple as that. Now, another scenario that happens is when your interviewer is constantly asking you the same question over and over, and they keep digging deeper and digging deeper. Now, that's not necessarily a test. That's usually a result of you not providing them with enough information. So if they ask you, can you tell me about a time, when you did blank, and you just give them a real short answer, and they're not really getting a good feeling for, what you're capable of, so they might ask the question a different way, and they might just keep poking at you. Now, usually, they like to dig deeper into situations about, when you were fired. So can you tell me, why you were fired for such and such job? Now, I know people don't really like to talk about being fired, so they give really short answers. Now, sometimes the interviewer really wants to know what happened, so they might probe a little bit deeper. And that's what they're doing when they ask questions over and over and over again, or the same ones, or just a little bit different. They're just probing to get more information from you. So if you find that they're doing that, just understand that your interviewer doesn't feel that you're providing them with enough information, and they just want to go a little bit deeper. So that's not so much of a test. The last one I have for you here, now this really depends on the type of position. When employers hire people into certain positions, they need a certain personality type. So if you're hiring, let's say, a salesperson who's going to be on the phone, you're going to need somebody who has a high degree of ego strength, who is used to rejection. So your interviewer might deliberately tell you flat out that he doesn't feel that you're right for this position. And a great example of this is from Chet Holmes. He talks a lot about the candidates that he interviewed. And one of the things that he did, because he hired salespeople, was he would reject them during the interview. And anybody with a low amount of ego strength is just going to say, well, okay, I guess you would know, you're right. But since he's hiring people who are going to face rejection on a daily basis, he needs somebody with a very high level of ego strength. So in this one interview that Chet talks about, he's interviewing this guy, and he pretty much tells the guy that, I really don't think you're right for this position, and I'm just not hearing top producer from you. And the guy responds back and says, well, maybe you're deaf. And then the guy goes into all the reasons as to why he is a top producer. He starts talking about all the achievements, all his sales quotas that he's met and everything. And, and then Chet just says, hey, no problem, you're hired. But the thing is, it was a test. It was a test to reject candidates during the interview process, to either, make them go home, because if you don't have a high level of ego strength, you're not going to perform well in a sales environment, because you need to be accustomed to rejection. I mean, people in sales get rejected, up to 7 times before they close a deal. So if you're going to, turn tail and run after 1 or 2 no's, then you're not cut out for the position. So they want somebody who is going to be able to handle that rejection head on, even in the interview. So that, my friend, is all I have for you. I hope you found these different scenarios helpful, and maybe they'll help you determine whether your interviewer is testing you, playing mind games, or if they're just bad. Now remember, if you come back and say any of these things that I told you to say, you could be offending your interviewer, depending on what their intentions are. So a word of caution, please only use if you are extremely comfortable saying those kinds of things, and if you're, extremely comfortable getting kicked out of the interview process, because that could very well happen. So again, that's all I have for you. But while you're here, as always, I want to share with you my top 10 interview questions and answers. I just rewrote this book, and you can download this from jobinterviewtools.com/top10. This covers the top 10 most common questions that you are likely to get asked in any job interview. And I go into detailed steps about how to answer each of those questions. I tell you, how to break it down so that you can answer your question, in the right framework. And it, goes into more detail about, tell me about yourself, why do you want to work here, what are your weaknesses, what are your strengths, what are your goals, and it even has about 13 different questions that you might consider asking your interviewer. So this is a great little book, my gift to you, just for spending some time with me here today. And give it a try. I think you'll like it. And if you're new to my channel and you really like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you've been around for a while and you haven't subscribed yet, what's holding you back? Please subscribe, and that way you'll get notifications every time I release a new video. Now that, my friend, is all I have for you. I wish you the very best on your next job interview, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.